adventure, sports, outdoors. With host Harry Canterbury.
There I was, back in the wild again, and I felt right at home where I belong. I had that feeling coming over me again, just like it happened so many times before.
Hi, Harry Canterbury with another edition of Adventure Sports Outdoors. We're here at our home in Peoria, Illinois. I've got our little Nellie with us. She was down in Florida and really had a great time and loves it down there just as well as we do. We've got an interesting program. Dave Barth of Pekin Gun in Pekin, Illinois, and a good friend named Lindqwister went to Africa on a safari. And it was a selected safari hunt. They took animals that were needed to be taken to control the herd, the meat, and nothing is wasted. The meat goes to the natives. They live there and they haven't had any meat to eat, so to speak, in over a year and a half because of the COVID. The COVID has been destructive to so many industries and so many countries, and hopefully here in our country we've got it under control. I know I had my vaccination, Kathy's had hers, our second, we got a little sick, but if you have not got your vaccination, please get it. I know people that have had it, and it's not a fun thing to get. Jim Conover, a former policeman in Pekin, Illinois, who is a filmmaker, a writer, amongst many other things that he does. And he's going to talk about a segment that he did, a television program that is being broadcast across the world right at this time. Got a great show. We're glad to be home and glad to be back in central Illinois. But we had a wonderful stay in Florida.
We're looking forward to going boating this summer and seeing all our friends and
getting some fish.
And getting some fish.
We want to get some
fishing.
bluegills.
Yes.
I didn't find any bluegills down there. I know they're there, but we were fishing in the saltwater.
Sail cats.
Yeah, sail cats and snook and redfish and many other species. There's like 400 different types of species that live in the Gulf of Mexico. But we had a fabulous time. But it's always good to come back to where you're born and raised, in Peoria, Illinois. So stay tuned today for a great show.
Adventure Sports Outdoors is brought to you in part by Corsall Lumber, manufacturers of quality hardwood products, buyers of standing timber in Smithfield. Central Pool Supply, everything from pools to pool tables and much more in Peoria on West Pioneer Parkway. Kelleher's Irish Pub and Eatery, located on Peoria's riverfront, open 11 a.m. daily. Eastport Marina, one of the only marinas in its class between Chicago and St. Louis, on Mariners Way in East Peoria. Goodwill, supporting our veterans with job placement assistance, health, housing, and resource referrals. And the General Wayne A. Downing Home for Veterans, all because you shop and donate. And by Lori Feld of Allstate Insurance, conveniently located in Peoria, Springfield, and their new location at 411 East Washington Street in East Peoria. Our thanks to all of these sponsors.
Hi, I'm Dave Barth with your Sportsman's Tip of the Week. If you've ever thought about going to Africa, now is the time to go. They have not had hunters for a year and a half because of the virus. And we were some of the first hunters there in Africa, and we had a great time. We did run into a little snag with airfare, and Alf will tell you about that.
Well, traveling during COVID times is a challenge, and we had actually 3 different airlines canceling our flights. We started with Qatar Airlines. They canceled after a few months, and then with British Airways they did the same, and then KLM, Royal Dutch Airways, also canceled. But then the travel agent noticed that the flights went on the weekends while they were canceling during the weekdays. So we actually flew out on a Saturday and then flew back on a Sunday. So it was a bit of an adventure to get there. And then the last day before we're leaving, they actually canceled the flight going back. So we had to get it last minute.
Before we're leaving.
Yes. So, but we were able to get there and back. We were supposed to do a 10-day hunt, but it turned out to be more of a 12-day stay in Namibia because we could fly pretty much on the weekends only. And as long as you had vaccinations and negative tests, it was okay. So it is possible to do it, but it takes a little doing.
When we got to the airport, we get off the airplane and the guide is there. We could spot him a mile away that he was a guide, and took us to the ranch. And the accommodations were fantastic. We had our own room, our own bathroom, and everything was clean, organized. It was right on the property. We stayed right on the ranch.
Right. It was a separate building, but we had our own building for ourselves. And it had like a little kitchenette, and it had refrigerators, and it had a nice entertainment area and so forth, and a nice porch.
The thing about Africa is you can go there and hunt 5 or 6 plains game animals for about the same cost as an elk hunt in Wyoming or Montana.
It is a remarkable place to go. And the temperature was very pleasant, 60 to 70.
Yes.
And it was not much bugs or anything, and it was very safe.
And we went there in March of this year.
Yeah, March and April.
It was a good trip. And two of the questions I was asked before the trip is, are you going to be hunting animals in a game preserve, or are they fenced in, or are they chained up and you shoot them? And what do you do with the meat? And we hunted on a 250,000 acre ranch. And how the hunt would progress, we'd get in the back of a truck. We'd sit on, often I would sit in the back of a truck on a bench seat. Our guide would drive around on rough roads or trails or just through the brush, and we would spot animals, and then we would stalk them. I carried a 270, Off carried a 300 Winchester Magnum with a silencer.
That's right.
And it made the rifle really big, but it also reduced the recoil, and it was fairly quiet. So we'd stalk the animals, take the animals, and we usually shot from a tripod. Our guide would carry a tripod, we would carry our rifles, and we would take the animals, and then he would drive the truck up to the animals, we'd load them up, and go back to the ranch.
Let's mention the meat. None of the meat of the animals that you kill in Africa is going to go to waste. None of it, including the organs and including the intestines. And so all of it was either in part eaten by us, by the ranch, by people working at the ranch, by villagers. So all the meat gets used, so none of it is wasted. In addition to that, of course, we have the trophies and the hides and so on.
Yes.
So the animal is respected in that sense.
We ate everything we shot except the warthog. They said the warthog was not good eating, so we didn't even try that. But yeah, we ate for lunch and dinner just about everything we shot the same day or the next day. And the rancher kept a little of the meat, and the rest of the meat went to, they have like a tent city there, and they haven't had meat from hunters for a year and a half. Yeah, so they welcomed us coming, to supply them with a little bit of meat.
That's right. Speaking of warthogs, by the way, you got a beautiful one, and the tusks are quite interesting. There are some souvenirs that you can get in country, and here, this is a warthog souvenir that's been carved out, and it's actually quite beautiful. This is one of the very interesting souvenirs that you can get in Namibia, and some of the things you can do with the animals that you get. And you got a warthog, David.
I did. Second day we were there, I harvested a warthog.
So this is one of the things you can do with that trophy, in addition to the skull and the head and all of that. So, and there are other interesting souvenirs you can get in Namibia. In addition to these kind of things, there are heavy wood called ironwood.
Ironwood, a lot of crafts, locally made stuff. A lot of their economy is based on tourists and hunters, and they haven't had any business for, again, a year and a half.
Other souvenirs you can get, for example, are these knives, and we can show them here if you want to see them. These are specialized steel knives with engravings that actually came from the ranch that we stayed at, the 250,000 acre ranch. And these are beautiful souvenirs to have, and it actually has a little birth certificate that tells you about the materials, the steel, the wood, and so forth.
We need to talk about the animals we took. And we took of course, a warthog we talked about, gemsbok, kudu. Well, you took the kudu.
Yes.
And springbok.
Springbok, impala, red hartebeest, blue wildebeest, and a black wildebeest. You got the blue and I got the black. The kudu one has an interesting story behind
Yes,
it
go
that
ahead,
may be
tell that
worth
story.
describe. We had been hunting all day. We hadn't seen anything that day. We were kind of disappointed. We were driving back, and David spotted a kudu standing under a tree on the other side of a ravine, a little bit of a distance from the road, and it was getting dark. But I was able to get down and get a really good shot at him, 250-yard shot, I think it was, and it actually broke the shoulder, went through both lungs and the heart, and the animal took 2 steps and fell and was down for good. And it took us a while to get there because we had to climb down the ravine and up on the other side. And we were able to take some pictures, but then it was getting really dark. The animal was so big, it was, I think, around 800 pounds or so, and it had to be quartered in the field, and it was too late to do that. So we had to leave it there, and I was worried that jackals and hyenas and leopards and so forth would eat this animal overnight. But the guide said something very interesting. He said, leave a piece of clothing on the animal and no one will touch it for days. And so we actually left this hat. So you can see this hat here, which actually has a blood stain left on it from the kudu. So we left it on the kudu overnight, and the next morning nobody had touched it, which I thought was an amazing story. We were driving towards a pond, and we were up on a hill pretty far away, maybe a mile and a half away, and the guide, he saw a bunch of gamsbok, which has these little long straight horns down by the pond. So we stopped immediately and we got off from the vehicle. And then we stalked, and we had to get close enough for a good ethical shot.
We were shooting through brush and trees and all that kind of stuff.
And we were going bent over, and you know, there were thorn bushes and everything else, but we were silently going down there until we got within about 200 yards, I think. And so we set up there, and I shot the first one. And the interesting thing was I had the dampener,
the silencer.
The silencer on, and the animals didn't move, except the one that I shot.
And I was standing back a little bit with no round in the chamber, not expecting to have a shot, and they didn't know where the shot came from.
Right.
And so I was able to harvest my animal within seconds of Alf taking his.
Right. And so we got 2 for 1 on that hunt. And then we put both of them in the truck, and we were able to fit both of them. They're about 500-600 pounds each. So, yeah.
And then the hunt for the black wildebeest was a pretty interesting hunt. They're hard to come across, they're hard to stalk, and we stalked this one for quite a while, and it was down in a ravine, and it was about 450 yards away, and it was looking at me, and again on cross sticks with that 270 at a pretty good distance, and that's probably, what, a 600-700 pound animal, I would say.
It is, absolutely.
And I hit it with that 270, and it ran probably maybe 75 to 100 yards, and of course it went down a deeper ravine and finally, you know, expired, and we had a heck of a time getting that out. Had to winch it out of the creek, and it was a good hunt.
It was a good hunt, and the angle you had was so small.
Because yeah, it was not a side angle, it was looking at us.
Yeah, and that was quite amazing.
The neatest thing, didn't involve hunting, was we watched a herd of zebra cross right in front of our vehicle.
That's right.
And we watched them for probably 10-15 minutes, and to see zebra in the wild was, it was worth the trip just to see that.
And the gamsboks that we saw that were running on the sides and everything else and crossing, and the giraffes. Remember the little herd of giraffes? I didn't realize how large a giraffe is. We didn't hunt them, we just watched them with awe. When they're moving, it looks like they're moving in slow motion, but they're actually moving incredibly fast because they're like almost like dinosaurs. They're enormously large animals, and when they take a step, it's a very long distance.
For me, it was a trip of a lifetime. I said all the way there, I'm never going to do this again. It was a once-in-a-lifetime trip, but we had such a great time on the way back. I said, I'm not going to rule out not going back. And so maybe in a few years, we'll try it again.
What a neat trip, something I've never done but always wanted to, is to go to Africa on a safari. And I'm sure many of you have wanted to do the same thing. Now we're going to go to Pekin, Illinois and see our good buddy Jim Conover, filmmaker and writer.
Harry, I'm here with award-winning author, award-winning filmmaker, and retired police detective Jim Conover. Jim, welcome to Adventure Sports Outdoors.
Hello there.
Jim, tell us about your journey and when did you come to Central Illinois?
Well, I was born and raised in southeast Missouri in the cotton fields down there. When I was 17, I joined the Army, United States Army, and went to Korea for a year, spent 3 years of active duty, and I finally came up to Pekin, Illinois in 1962. and took several odd jobs. And I worked in the construction trade for a while, but I worked at a grocery store where I met a cashier by the name of Judy Van Atten.
And that would become?
Judy Conover. She was a gorgeous little thing. And then while I was working at Powerton out here as a welder, I run across a bunch of policemen, and we were pretty good friends, and they talked me into joining the police department. But anyway, it was a dream of mine. In those old cotton fields back home, I used to dream about being a policeman. So I joined the Pekin Police Department and served 20 years there. And about 10 of those years was as a detective. And that's mainly what I did before I started writing. And it was during the time I was still on the police department that I began my writing career. And I didn't call it a career at the time. I was just going to do a little research on something. I started researching a little newspaper article. And during that research, I saw that it was developing in something a lot larger than that. And it was about a gang of desperados that terrorized Tazewell County in 1869. So eventually, me and another policeman, James Brecker, we started researching it together and ended up writing a manuscript on it called Lynch Law. So at night, I would go in and I'd be writing on the typewriter on third shift on the police department, and was typing it on an old typewriter. And the guys would all gather around on break time, and they'd want to know what happened, who did who to what. And so it was like every night we would have like a little series going on and finally we got the manuscript finished. And it was years before we actually published that book. And it was just by a fluke that we did that. And it was several years later, after I actually retired, that I actually published the book. It was in the 1990s. I fell in love. It's like a father with a new baby. And so I said, well, look at this. It had been a lot of years since we had done the research, and I did the book. So the second book, I decided just sit down and write a fiction. And my second book was Greenhorns and Killer Mountains. I knew that during 1979, while being on the police department, I had headed up an investigation into a couple of missing boys here in Pekin, that one of them had been found murdered. Young kids from carnivals and near railroad tracks and such. So I headed that investigation up, and it culminated into several states, several agencies, and several missing and murdered young boys. And we caught the guy after a long, lengthy surveillance on him down in Springfield, Illinois, in the middle of the state fairgrounds while the fair was going on. We followed this guy for an entire week before we finally arrested him, and closed a lot of cases with this guy. So
Slayer of Innocence.
Yes, Slayer of Innocence. That was another one of my nonfiction books, and it was a difficult write, but I tried to stay on course with it all the way through it, and doing everything correct. And so I had that done in hardcover, and that was really, I loved the book myself. And then I went from that one, I said, well, okay, let me go back into fiction again. So I developed a character, and his name is Deuce Riker. And in the series, there's a Ace, Deuce, Trey. These are all brothers that were in the family of Deuce Riker. So I wrote about Deuce Riker, and that first book was Black Robe Killings, and it was about the killing of judges. So I wrote that one, and it came out good. So then, as Blood Diamonds came out, it was another attraction. I decided that I would write a third book on it. And so I wrote a third book on it, and it's called Deadly Treasures. Now, that would be the trilogy of Deuce Riker. However, Deadly Treasures I have not published because I had a brainstorm one night and decided that I would write a completely different novel. And it's called First Lady Abducted. I just got it back from the printers about 3-4 weeks ago, and it is the last book of my writing right now at this point.
If people want to learn more about you as an author, and they want to learn more about your books, or maybe how to get a book, what website should they go to?
Very simple, jimconover.com.
Well, you know, you mentioned the book, Slayer of Innocence, which was based on a real case that you worked.
Yes, it was.
That was turned into a documentary that went worldwide, and I think it's on Amazon Prime right now. And
I hadn't thought about it, making it into anything else other than the book. And then a friend of mine, he is also my cameraman. He's also done everything and helped us from the time we started making films all the way through. He started off with sound, then he's graduated to camera. And as a matter of fact, he's very close to me. But he talked us into doing this documentary about that. In fact, he even made a little clip and brought it to me and showed me, look, this is what we can do. So between Kenneth and me and another whole bunch of volunteers, we made a documentary about that book, Slayer of Innocence.
let's take a look at the trailer for that documentary.
Okay.
Here it is.
In the 1970s, children went missing in the Midwest, only to be found dead.
We searched everything we could search out there. We searched the boxcars. We searched the 4-H fairgrounds. We followed every lead that we could follow out there.
They all had something in common.
We were looking for any similar cases where young boys may have disappeared from state fairgrounds or railroad tracks nearby.
They were looking for a serial killer.
William Gotney, he had a nickname of Freight Train, and he got his nickname by hopping the freights all the time. He was a hobo.
He rode the rails. He could make a whistle like a freight train, sound just like you were standing next to a freight train.
It's quite loud, and the kids all loved him. We knew he killed Mark Helmick. We knew he killed Marty Lancaster in Normal, Illinois. He killed the 2 young men in Lincoln, Nebraska. It was Topeka, Kansas.
Where are you going to take Mark?
I'm going to take him on a train ride. Marty Lancaster left his house on a bicycle. Tied to the handlebars was a fishing stringer. It appeared that his hands had been tied behind him with that fishing stringer.
Freight Train.
Let's talk about this other film you made that got distributed.
That was the very first one.
That was the first one, yes.
That was the first
In,
one.
was it 2007? 2005.
That we started.
Okay.
And actually, we started in 2004. Somebody talked me into starting to write a screenplay, a new one, a Western.
So the film was called Sand Prairie, and after it was picked up by a distributor, it was renamed The Showdown and filmed right here in central Illinois.
And that was thanks also to Dean Williams, who runs a big production company in Springfield, but he loaned us during the winter. He loaned us his grip truck, which had all the equipment we needed to set up and run the lights and all the other stuff for it. We entered it into a film festival. We got a distributor. The only thing I'd like to add right now is the fact that without the boosting and the support of a lot of Central Illinois people, we could never have done the movie and probably not some of the books that I've written.
So tell me about this latest film that you've been working on.
For the last year, my cameraman Kenneth Hackney, Bill Hummel, me, Chris McKinney, who is also my drone operator, and Earl Candler, who is a member of the Marine Vets Motorcycle Club. We have worked for over a year filming this motorcycle club.
This is no ordinary motorcycle club.
Motorcycle club that's 100% either Marine Corps vets or Navy corpsmen that were assigned to Marine detachments.
This club, Marine Vets MC, is always the forefront in my mind. I'm always worried about my brothers.
These Marine vets are on a mission.
They're focused on supporting one another. They're focused on raising money in the local community to help local veterans.
22 veterans succumb to suicidal thoughts every day.
The club runs on the 22 service members every day who commit suicide.
Some guys really need us badly. We've saved a lot of lives. I can tell you about some of our members that were on the brink. I'm not gonna mention no names, but these guys were on the brink. And we came along, they came to us, and their wives has come to me personally and says, you know what? You saved my husband's life. This club, not me, but this chapter, this group of Marines, this Marine vets.
Prevent 22.
Jim Conover, thank you so much for sharing your experience as a police officer, an award-winning author, an award-winning filmmaker, and an all-around good guy in the community.
It's been enjoyable to meet you, and you too, Harry.
Adventure Sports Outdoors is brought to you in part by Corsall Lumber, manufacturers of quality hardwood products, buyers of standing timber in Smithfield. Central Pool Supply, everything from pools to pool tables and much more in Peoria on West Pioneer Parkway. Kelleher's Irish Pub and Eatery, located on Peoria's riverfront, open 11 a.m. daily. Eastport Marina, one of the only marinas in its class between Chicago and St. Louis, on Mariners Way in East Peoria. Goodwill, supporting our veterans with job placement assistance, health, housing, and resource referrals. And the General Wayne A. Downing Home for Veterans, all because you shop and donate. And by Lori Feld of Allstate Insurance, conveniently located in Peoria, Springfield, and their new location at 411 East Washington Street in East Peoria. Our thanks to all of these sponsors.
Thanks for watching another edition of Adventure Sports Outdoors. I sure hope you enjoyed the show. It was on my bucket list, but she's not going to let me go to Africa by myself. Are you?
No.
Okay, well, that's the end of that. So I'll take that off the bucket list. No Africa trip. But join us next month. We hope to do a program with Dave on the guns of Stalingrad, the German guns and the Russian guns. And
World War II.
World War II. And we may have a guy who was a Cossack. He's my neighbor across the street. He's a cancer scientist, of all things. He was born and raised in Russia, in Siberia, and his grandfather was a Cossack. So hopefully we'll get Sergey on too, and he'll tell you about the stories that his grandfather told him about the siege of Stalingrad. See you next month.